It was one of those nights where the city hummed with life and secrets, the kind of night where the truth lurked in shadows. My name is Detective Johnson, and I've seen my fair share of dark alleys and darker hearts, but nothing quite prepared me for the call that came through that night. "We've got a high-profile murder," the sergeant said, his voice tight. "Edward Chambers. The fashion photographer." Edward Chambers wasn't just any photographer. He was the darling of the industry, celebrated for his avant-garde shoots and his uncanny ability to make the impossible look effortless. But now, his career wasn't the only thing cut short. I arrived at the scene just past midnight. Chambers' studio was a loft in the heart of the arts district, its sleek modernity marred by the sight of yellow tape and uniformed officers. Inside, the space was a chaotic juxtaposition of luxury and death. The body lay sprawled near his desk, a pool of blood congealing around his head. His camera, still on its tripod, pointed towards the scene like a silent witness. Blunt force trauma to the skull, the medical examiner, Dr. Harlow, informed me as she stood over the body. Probably a heavy object. Death was quick. Maybe even instantaneous. "Anything missing?" I asked, glancing around the studio. The shelves of expensive equipment seemed untouched, the drawers undisturbed. "Doesn't look like robbery," said Officer Klein, who'd been first on the scene. "But there's something you'll want to see in the back." I followed him through the studio, past racks of designer clothes and props, to a nondescript door at the far end. "It was locked when they found it," Klein explained, "but they'd forced it open. Inside was a darkroom. Or at least, that's what it seemed at first. The air was thick with the chemical tang of developing solutions, and the walls were lined with photographs drying on wires. But these weren't the kind of photos Chambers was known for. These were invasive, intimate shots of people who clearly had no idea they were being captured. Models, celebrities, even a few faces I recognized from the society pages. "Jesus," I muttered, flipping through a stack of prints on the work table. Some were taken through windows, others in private moments during photo shoots. "These are blackmail material." "That's what we figured," Klein said. Maybe one of his subjects didn't take kindly to being exploited. It was a theory, but not the only one. Chambers' death could have been personal. Maybe professional. Maybe both. But the discovery of the darkroom turned the case into something bigger than a simple homicide. Someone had a motive that went beyond money or revenge. Something rooted in the images lining these walls. I spent the next few hours cataloging the contents of the darkroom, each photograph a potential lead, each face a possible suspect. By the time I left the studio, dawn was breaking, casting a muted gray light over the city. I couldn't shake the feeling that this case was going to be as messy and layered as the man's life itself. Back at the precinct, I started running names. The subjects in Chambers' photographs were a who's who of the fashion and entertainment world. One name caught my eye, Lydia Dane, a rising star in the modeling scene and the last person known to have visited Chambers before his death. According to his assistant, they'd had a heated argument the day before. I'd met Lydia before briefly, at a charity gala where Chambers was the guest of honor. She'd seemed confident, poised, the kind of person who knew how to command attention without demanding it. But the Lydia who sat across from me in the interrogation room that morning was a different woman entirely. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. "I didn't kill him," she said before I could even ask the question. "I swear to God I didn't." "You had a fight with him," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "What was it about?" She hesitated, glancing at her lawyer, who gave her a nod. He had something on me," she admitted. "A photo. Something that could ruin me if it got out. He threatened to use it unless I cooperated." "Cooperated how?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Does it matter?" "The point is, he was using those pictures to control people. I'm not the only one. There are others." "But I didn't kill him." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Lydia's fear seemed genuine, but fear didn't rule out desperation. And desperation could drive someone to do things they'd never imagined. The question was, did her desperation turn deadly? Detective Sam Thorne joined me in the observation room after Lydia's initial statement. His green eyes scanned her through the one-way glass, a faint scowl tugging at his lips. "She's scared, no doubt about it," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But scared of what? Or who?" "Good question," I replied. "She's not our only lead, but she's got motive and opportunity." Sam nodded, his lean frame tense with thought. "You dig deeper on Lydia." "I'm going to the studio to recheck the scene. Something about this doesn't sit right." Later that morning, Sam called me from Chambers' studio. "Johnson, you need to see this," he said. "I found a hidden safe behind a false panel in the darkroom. Looks like our guy kept more than just photographs." When I arrived, Sam had already cracked the safe open. Inside was a stack of envelopes, each labeled with a name. Beneath them lay a ledger, meticulous and damning. It listed payments made to Chambers, some shockingly high, and corresponding initials. Blackmail, I muttered, flipping through the envelopes. Each contained more compromising photographs, some with accompanying handwritten notes. He was extorting these people. And it's not just celebrities, Sam added, pointing to the ledger. There are business tycoons, politicians, even law enforcement. My stomach turned as I recognized a few initials from the precinct. This case just got a lot more complicated. Sam pulled out one envelope labeled LD, Lydia Dane. Inside was a single photograph. It wasn't particularly explicit, but it was enough to suggest an affair with a married A-list actor. Enough to ruin her career and reputation. If Lydia found out about this, Sam said, she had every reason to want him silenced. But it's not just her, I said. There are dozens of names here. Any one of them could have done it. Then we narrow it down. Sam's green eyes locked on mine, determined. Start with who had access to the studio and who had the most to lose. Back at the precinct, we ran background checks on Chambers' known associates and the people in the photographs. Lydia was clean, no history of violence, no record of suspicious activity. But one name stood out, Victor Kane, a high-powered attorney whose name appeared in both the ledger and one of the photographs. His payments to Chambers had been the largest by far. Victor Kane had a reputation for being ruthless, both in court and in his personal life. If anyone had the means and the cold-blooded nature to kill Chambers, it was him. We brought Kane in for questioning. He arrived with an air of smug confidence, his sharp suit impeccable, his expression unreadable. "This is a waste of my time," he said as he sat across from me and Sam. "Whatever Edward Chambers was up to, it has nothing to do with me." "Then why were you paying him tens of thousands of dollars?" I asked, sliding the ledger across the table. Kane's jaw tightened ever so slightly. "That's privileged information. Suffice it to say, I was handling a delicate matter for a client." Sam leaned forward, his piercing green eyes boring into Kane's. "You sure about that? Because we've got a photograph of you in a very compromising position." For the first time, Kane faltered. "That's irrelevant. Chambers assured me those photographs would never see the light of day. And yet here we are," Sam said. "Chambers was blackmailing you, wasn't he? You had the most to lose if those photos got out." "Enough to kill for." Kane's composure cracked, but only slightly. "I didn't kill him," he said through gritted teeth. "I hated the bastard, but I didn't touch him." "Then who did?" I pressed. Kane's gaze flickered, and for a moment, I thought he might confess. But instead, he leaned back, his confidence returning. "You'll have to figure that out yourself, detectives." Frustrated, we let Kane go but kept him under surveillance. Meanwhile, Sam had the forensics team re-examine the studio. Their findings were unexpected. Traces of DNA on the murder weapon, a heavy camera tripod, didn't match Kane or Lydia. It belonged to someone else entirely, Chambers' assistant, Mark Vega. Mark had been cooperative during our initial interviews, but something about his eagerness to help had always struck me as off. When we brought him in for a second round of questioning, the cracks in his story began to show. "I didn't mean to kill him," Mark finally admitted, his voice trembling. "He was a monster. You don't know what it was like working for him. He used those photos to ruin people's lives. And when I tried to quit, he threatened to do the same to me." "So you snapped," Sam said, his tone even. Mark buried his face in his hands. "I didn't plan it. We were arguing, and he said he'd destroy me. I grabbed the tripod and I just wanted him to stop." The confession was raw and unpolished, but it fit the evidence. Chambers' death wasn't premeditated, it was the culmination of years of manipulation and fear. As Mark was led away in cuffs, I turned to Sam. "Case closed," I said, though the victory felt hollow. Sam nodded, his expression grim. Chambers might have been the victim, but he created the monsters around him. In the end, he was as much to blame as anyone. The city hummed with life and secrets once more, but this time, one of those secrets had been dragged into the light. And as much as I hated what we'd uncovered, I knew it wouldn't be the last.